the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Folks, it has been a thriller of the week in the Canadian Football League. We had, overtime games, quarter madness, and once again, the question of why would you want to be a kicker, that comes up once again. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Outstanding panel, as always, this week. Informative, controversial, opinionated. But yes, these guys know what they are talking about. Folks, no one breaks down the game better for fans and newcomers on the TSN CFL broadcast. Welcome back. Good friend of the show, CFL on TSN analyst Glen Suter. Thanks for joining us, Glen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, speaking of a guy that tells it like it is, it has been an entertaining kind of guy that we've had on the program before, informative, and, of course, he lets the people of Calgary know whether it is the Flames or the Stampeders what's really going down. From Sportsnet 960, Will Nault. Will, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Bubba. It's always fun to be on.
For sure. Let's go right at it, guys. And we'll start with you, Will. Calgary come back from being down 24-0. They stunned the Ticats 33-30 in overtime. Let's take a side right now, guys. Credit to the Stampeders for the win or problems for the Ticats in the loss?
Yeah, and I'm curious where Suits is on this one. It's always interesting in football when you compare it to a sport like hockey. Everyone talks about the score effect, right? And when you're up by 21 points at the half, I think it's pretty easy to let your foot off the gas and maybe don't execute as well as you did in the first half. And, you know, if you're a team like Calgary, I think you're coming into the second half fired up. You want to have a much better second half. And sometimes that snowball can get rolling the other way. And I think there was a little bit of that in that game. So, you know, to answer that question kind of right down the middle, Bubba, I think credit the Stampeders, but also if you're Hamilton, you've got to figure out a way to know that that is a pretty good group on the other side, and you've got to keep your foot on the gas. You can't afford to, you know, whether it's 3 series or 4 series or a quarter, you can't afford to take that off because they're going to come back and punch you right in the mouth, and I think we saw that. And so, again, I think it's a little bit of both, but, you know, certainly for Calgary, you got your head coach coming out of the half and saying flat out, we got our ass kicked. And then in the second half, you know, you're playing that much better. You know, give a lot of credit to Calgary too, because it could have been easy to fold your tent and say it's just not our week.
Yeah, Will, I agree, except for I'll take it to the Calgary side because, you know, I'm amused at times when a lot of people in the media will look at it and you know, say this team's struggling and take that approach. And I, you know, if that was the Bucks and, you know, Tom Brady in a comeback, you know, we'd be electing him president of the United States. I mean,
yeah,
this was one of the great comebacks in the regular season in the history of the league. This was a great example of what is great about Canadian football, that in the final 3 minutes of our game is the most exciting 3 minutes in sports anywhere in the world in any sport. And it was another example of that. It also, with the pressure on Bo Levi Mitchell this year and his outstanding resume, it does two things really. It shows you that Bo has earned it, that when the pressure is on, Bo can handle it. He's done that in championship games. He's done that to get the Stamps to the number one position in the West Division, to win those West Finals, and all the Grey Cup appearances. You know, he there's a reason for that. And then it even extends to the decision by Dave Dickenson to not pull him. Now, I didn't do the game, so I don't want to talk out of school, but it didn't sound like he was playing real well early on in the game. He thrown an interception. You know, there was an opportunity there for Dave Dickenson to make a different decision. But keep in mind that when you do that as a coach, you have basically now decided that the resume isn't going to matter as much anymore. You're at a different point in your career, and now we're going to probably do this all season long back and forth with two guys.
Yeah.
But with Bo's resume, guys, he has earned it. He has earned the chance to work himself out of those troubles in games, and he does it time and time again. This is one of the greatest comebacks in regular season CFL history.
And the other thing
let's
too,
throw in the fact of the weather too.
Yeah.
Like that wind was really howling, and so what you would think would be an advantage in either the third or the fourth quarter for the Ticats or the Stampeders it didn't really matter for Calgary because they scored in every quarter, in the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, on top of Glen's point, too, I think it's 100% bang on, because if Dave Dickinson makes a decision to pull him, all the questions coming into the year are louder. You probably got a pissed off quarterback, and you're probably not going to be able to maybe get him back. And then you're dealing with a whole season of, game in and game out. You're trying to make that decision on the fly. It's not easy. And I think the veteran poise of a guy like Dave Dickinson, who has probably been in that spot in Bo's shoes in his playing career as well, he's able to kind of look at that and say, you know what, I'm going to stick with my guy. I'm going to let him figure this thing out. If we get to a fourth quarter and we're still down by 30, that's a completely different conversation, because then we're not faced with those questions going into week 3. So I think that's a bang-on point, Glen, and I think that not a lot of people talked about that, and the fact that all these questions coming in, that could have been a massive turning point, or to take the TSN turning point of the season. That could have been huge if Dave Dickinson makes that call, and even if they lose that game, or even if they come back to win, it makes it probably even worse, because then you're saying, you got to start Jake Maier in week 3. But, he sticks with his guy, and now they probably have eased that tension a little bit, because here in Calgary, it's been at an all-time high for the first month of the year. And we haven't seen that in the last decade, ever since Bo Levi's been this team's quarterback. That's the one position and the one part about this team that you never have questions about. And now it's been all that's been talked about preseason. You're in the second game of the season, and you make that decision. Wouldn't have been pretty. And keep in mind, it wasn't Bo's decision or due to his playing in the first game, but he gets hurt, and Jake Maier has to come in. He leads the team on that game-winning drive. Man, it's a huge, huge turning point to the Calgary season.
Subtopic from that game, the third quarter, fumble by Dane Evans was on a 3rd and 1, and I have to admit, I thought the whistle had blown, and I thought that when the play was going to be reviewed, the touchdown, the strip sack, the strip and return for a touchdown was going to be negated. Glenn, normally, and Dane Evans in his post-game comments had said, I've done that play 300,000 times in my career, and usually when you get that forward progress, good football term right there, the whistle is blown, but it was not. The strip, and then it goes the other way. The game is all of a sudden tied. Your thoughts on that play?
Yeah, I think sort of history and the precedent that is there is that the official can not only stop forward progress, but it can be slightly before the whistle is actually blown. They can say he was stopped, his progress was stopped, and the intent was there to blow the whistle, so therefore we're marking him down by contact right here. In some of those short yardage plays, there's inconsistency, though, because, how many times have we said or called a game where the second effort, he stopped initially, but then rolls off the hit, and that second effort is what gets the first down, and you want to allow a quarterback to be able to do that, or whomever's in short yardage. So, I that's not really my concern with that one play with officiating. I think in our game that I did in Edmonton, there were just too many calls in that game that were borderline. And when an official takes the flag out of his pocket, he has altered the game, for one team or the other, good or bad. And once you take that flag out of your pocket, it better be a penalty. And I'm not sure we are in that mentality in the Canadian Football League. I don't think we have been for a long time. And when the league office talks about game flow being an issue that they want to improve upon, to me, they're missing the point unless they deal with officiating and make sure we take the 25 flags per game or whatever it is right now and cut that in half. Now, the teams have responsibilities too, and they have to be smarter, especially after the whistle when they can control it. I was okay with the one play because there is inconsistency on short yardage, Bubba, but I'm concerned with too many flags, both from the team's perspective, from the game flow perspective, and from officials throwing flags on borderline calls. Let the men decide the outcome of a play.
Well,
yeah, I agree. I think that, especially with the game flow topic, I think that, that's a situation as you're trying to, the CFL is trying to get those younger fans in, and what do young people want? They want pace. They want things to move. they don't like things to be stalled. And if you're having a huddle amongst your officials for a borderline call that half of them are saying is a penalty and half aren't, you're wasting a lot of time here. And so I think that's a huge one. And yeah, in terms of short yardage, I think that's the one thing that maybe sometimes we forget. And I love that Glenn brought it up, because the officials, just because maybe they didn't blow their whistle in time, they can still go back and say forward progress was stopped right here. This is where it was stopped. I know that, whether it was a fumble, whether it was a headshot, whatever the case may be, that happened after we had declared the play dead, even though the whistle wasn't blown at the time, but maybe he was moving the whistle up to his mouth or doing whatever in terms of the intent to blow the whistle. So I think you can always have those gray, and you're going to have Ticat fans that didn't like it and Calgary fans that liked it, or whatever the case may be. But I think those ones are tough because, and it's maybe the same thing about the gray area with some of these certain borderline penalties. I might think the forward progress is stopped. Glenn might think he still had forward progress. It's also one of those tough ones too, because sometimes you're maybe disagreeing with what you think is still forward progress.
Let me throw you a curveball here, guys. I didn't write this one down for you, but I feel like we got to bring this up. It was Hall of Fame weekend in the Canadian Football League, and we had an outstanding double-class situation, which I thought was just fantastic, well-received. I heard the ceremonies, the induction, the day before the Hall of Fame game. It was just a good time held by all, and you always hear it from, even Coach O told me that it was just great to be amongst these people that he considered Hall of Famers, and to be part of it was just a Hall of Fame feeling, just all in all. Glenn, I'll throw this to you. Who is not in the Hall of Fame that should be in the Hall of Fame right now? I'm going to throw out just a name right now that comes to me from my watching days, and a guy that's career has completed. Arlen Bruce. I feel like everywhere he went, he was a game changer, with whether it be Toronto, Hamilton, or even in the end of his career with BC. Does he belong in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at his numbers again and just see, the longevity aspect and where his numbers are and the overall big picture. I think that's got to be part of this discussion, unless you have the one-off Doug Flutie, discussion where Doug didn't play a long time in Canadian football, but he was so dominant and put up such big numbers and championships and MOPs that, he just was on another planet. So when you get that one-off guy, then yeah. But other than that, I really think there's got to be a longevity sort of aspect to the Hall of Fame, that you're not going to just do it for 3 or 4 years. There's some guys in there that are in this category that maybe shouldn't be in but in my opinion, but I thought everybody that went in this time was well deserving. Arlen Bruce, I'd have to look at the overall numbers again, Bubba, but I agree with your assessment on the impact he made on every team he played on.
Well,
yeah, and I think the other controversial topic perhaps in Hall of Fame conversations is championships, right? And sometimes guys will get held out because they don't have a great cup ring or haven't been amongst teams that are winning all the time. And, if you've done it forever and maybe you don't have a great cup ring, I think those are some of the exceptions or exemptions we can have. But it's always, I think, a weird conversation, and it is, I think, very subjective. I don't know if there's a massive omission that I can think of the top of my head. I think that everybody, it's funny you mentioned omissions, and speaking of people that maybe don't get love, I think it was pretty cool to see a guy like Freddie Childress get in, because again, it's maybe not, one of the first two things that you look at and say, oh, he had a fantastic career. And of course, blocking for a guy like Calvin Anderson, you're probably going to have, a lot of all-star nominations, but I thought it was cool to finally get, Freddie Childress in there, who probably could have been in a handful of years prior, and being in Calgary, obviously he had some huge years in Calgary, but I think those are, in terms of, you're talking about Hall of Fame omissions, I don't know where you stand on it, Glenn, but I think there's probably some guys that, definitely had some tough years in the line of scrimmage that probably gets or need some more love that they maybe haven't had so far in their career.
Yeah, and Big Freddie Childress has the best voice
Yes,
in
he
football.
does.
You know, I mean,
It's like, can you keep that guy in the booth, please, for the whole game? That would be great. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, like I look at a guy like Marv Levy though, and I just it is so cool as to his, you know, he's such a great ambassador no matter where he is in the world. When it comes to Canadian football, he will always talk about how great it is, how much respect he had for it. One of just 3 guys to be in both Hall of Fames, in Canton and also in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. You know, Bud Grant and Warren Moon, the other 2. So that's a short list. And, you know, to have him be a great ambassador for our game is just outstanding. So this was a great group. But I agree. You know, I like to look at the list of how many actual Canadians that have accomplished a ton in our game are in the Hall of Fame. Because sometimes I think the guys who vote on the Hall of Fame, you know, they get caught with the eye test when they look at a big, tall receiver from Oklahoma State or wherever, and he said he's real flashy, but what about the Canadian slapback who had over 10,000 yards? So I'd like to see those numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head. And also offensive linemen, like you mentioned, Will, like that, it's hard to track them sometimes. So do we have enough of those guys in, because they're super important? And then the one other category, and I'll just end it here, Bubba, but the one other category would be those special teams guys. In the Canadian Football League, you have that third element. The special teams are so much more prominent than any other league in the world. And so a cover guy who is a record breaker should be considered for that. He doesn't have to play on offense and defense. Those are important guys, not just returners, but the cover guys, the Mike Millers of the league.
Yeah, you brought up the likes of Marv Levy with the Alouettes, so let's kind of go to the Alouettes, where their owner, Gary Stern, told RDS, very popular, got all over the country, RDS being the French version of TSN, that Montreal, when they play Toronto, will kill them. They will kill them. That's a big word, kill. Now, after this shocking end result, and anyone that watched this week knows exactly what happened, so I'll ask the question. Should owners be seen and not heard? Glenn.
I liked that he got involved. You know, I really did. Maybe a different choice of words, especially in today's day and age, would have been a good idea. You know, but again, I think we all have to just relax on a lot of that stuff, and, you know, not be so woke that we take, you know, the intent of his comments and take them right down a bad rabbit hole into, you know, look what's happening in the world and the United States and, you know, all these things. And that was a bad choice of words. And, you know, I think we go way overboard in that sometimes. So I liked it, though. I mean, you know, it provided some interesting sort of side storyline in the game. I watched on TV. I didn't do the game, but to show him in the booth and you know, when his kicker misses and he just throws his hands in the air, and the reaction from Kahari Jones after
and whoever
his
the player was beside Kahari Jones couldn't believe it either.
Yeah. I mean that's, you know, that is part of, you know, the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory, and to have the owner kind of involved in it too, and engaging the audience and engaging the crowd with his Twitter feed and all that.
Well, you like the Jerry Jones attitude.
I was going to say, imagine telling Jerry Jones he can't speak on the radio. That wouldn't go very well. You know, I'm mixed on it, because I agree with Glenn. I think it was a poor choice of words. But the other thing we love in sports is rivalries. I mean, Toronto and Montreal are supposed to hate each other. I mean, that's what you want, right? And maybe not saying we're going to kill them is probably the way to go. But I think that it's good. I think we need more of that in the CFL. I don't know if we get a ton of it. And when you're in a league, you know, that small, and essentially everybody knows everybody, and you're, you know, playing against guys that used to be teammates or whatever the case may be, I think, you know, we need more of that kind of rivalry. And as Glenn said, he kind of had that nice side story going on it. So I didn't mind it. I just think that maybe, you know, instead of going at maybe a 12 out of 10, we probably could have used it at about a 5 or a 6 out of 10. That's probably where
But Bubba, Gary Stern should have, after the game, said, "We did beat Toronto, but our kicker missed, so they got lucky." and then walked away from there. And just, keep it going, keep poking.
The sad part about it is that he was 4 for 4 going into that 21-yarder. He looked great, Cote. Tough times, though.
Yeah, and you know what though, we should say that with receivers. We should say it with the guy who fumbles right at the end of the game.
Yeah, but can you say that, Glenn? Because it's a
human
kicker.
element.
It's a guy. He practices by himself. Come on, you know it.
I dealt with the kicker my whole career in Dave Ridgway, and he was a good one. He was a good one money time, but they're different cats now. They are different
Let's
cats.
stick with Montreal. Back-to-back weeks where we have seen a situation where Vernon Adams Jr. has gotten the start, has gotten the yank in favor of Trevor Harris. Trevor Harris led the team to what we all thought was going to be a game-winning drive and put them certainly in position to win a game against Toronto on the road. What is Kahari Jones going to do? Can he play flippy-floppy quarterbacks? Does he have to commit to one, Will? Is this a tough situation here? Because you got two veteran guys that apparently the team both like. But I don't feel like it's the same situation that Hamilton had last year with Evans and Masoli. This one seems a little deeper rooted.
And it's funny, we talked off the top about the Calgary situation, right? And I think the one in Montreal is a little bit flipped. You've got the youngster who's the starter, and you got the veteran who's got a pretty impressive CFL resume kind of waiting in the wings. And I think there's a little bit of pressure going into the year on Kahari Jones and where he is as head coach, because, there's all the talk about Machocha and he's not really his guy. How long is the leash for Kahari Jones? So I think he's feeling it a little bit, and I think he's trying his best to navigate that. But the only problem I have, and I don't know where Glen is on it, but flip-flopping quarterbacks is probably not the way to go, and you kind of got to declare that one guy's your guy and go with it. Now, the tricky part is, they signed Vernon Adams to that extension before the year, and we're, 5 quarters into the year, and his leash was about this long. So it feels like, going into the year, Kahari Jones maybe has more trust in the veteran guy. And, I think over his career, when he's on, he can be really, really good. But I think we've seen a very erratic Vernon Adams. And I think that Kahari Jones is maybe saying, Trevor Harris is maybe the more safer, conservative option, and I'm going to go with that in this situation because we need this game, and they ultimately do lose and go to 0-2. But it just feels like to me a coach who is maybe on the hot seat, maybe feeling a little bit, and wants to go with that veteran, conservative arm as opposed to a guy that, again, can be very electric, but also can be a bit erratic. So I don't know where you see it, Glenn, but that's kind of my view on what Kahari Jones is trying to navigate here in Montreal.
Yeah, what's that saying when you have two great quarterbacks? The problem is you don't have one, and that's sort of where they're at in Montreal. It's interesting to compare it to Calgary because the pressure on Bo Levi Mitchell very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, you got a young guy coming up through the ranks in Jake Mayer that has proven he can do it now. So. But completely different from the coach's perspective. So the coach makes a decision in Calgary and Dave Dickinson to play his guy who's earned the right to work himself out of these situations and to prove that he can handle this pressure and he can still lead the Stamps. He has earned the right. And if Dave wavers from that, then the rest of the team, that trickles down through the locker room. So the rest of the team looks at it and goes, wait a minute, no matter what I accomplish, you might just swap me out anyway. So it really it hits you in the gut in the locker room all the way through the roster. Whereas Vernon Adams hasn't earned that yet. I think he's still a bright young quarterback that can lead them to a playoff win, can possibly lead them to the Grey Cup. He has to prove that before we can all say it. But, it's a completely different situation. Back in the day, we had Ken Austin and Tom Burgess. And as long as they were good with it, Dane Evans and Jeremiah Masoli, back-to-back Grey Cup appearances. Didn't get across that threshold, but back-to-back appearances with both of them. So if the guys handle it properly, you can win with 2, but it's up to them to make sure the locker room doesn't get the
I'm curious where Trevor Harris is because he's been in this situation now the last couple of years, right? So to your point, Glenn, maybe he is more comfortable with it. Maybe he's and I think he's a pretty aware guy. I think he knows maybe what he is and where he is in his career at this point. And I do wonder if he's going in now and saying, you know what, maybe it is a situation where I can help young Vernon, but also if I'm called upon, it is my time and I can still do it. And it's not necessarily a foreign situation to him. And I think maybe that's what Kahari Jones sees. He goes, you know what, I think I can navigate this because this is not new to a guy like Trevor Harris.
When you look at Vernon Adams Jr., now remember, he's coming off a broken arm last year, right? And I mean, in his first preseason game, he threw 3 interceptions. Do you, Glenn, when you're seeing him play, is there anything you think that's lingering, or is this just Vernon Adams Jr. and who he is?
Yeah, I think that's the bigger issue. I haven't really seen, his throwing motion change, or that he's laboring after throws, or that he's showing that there's discomfort there, things like that. I haven't heard reports out of Montreal that it's bothering him or he's in the training room a ton. So, I don't know that it's physical. I think it's collective. Sometimes we put too much on those guys. Let me ask you guys this. Do we sometimes baby quarterbacks too much? I mean, every single other position, we always sort of applaud competition. So if you've got 2 free safeties battling for one job, your team is better for it. And if you have 2 receivers, same thing. And then we get to quarterbacks and we go, oh, we might damage his. Sometimes I think these are grown men that can compete. They know that if they fight each other in the meeting rooms and don't get along, their team will be divided. They know that. Both of these guys do. I don't think you're going to see it. These guys understand. They're veterans, and maybe we should not baby quarterbacks too much and just say, hey, go out there and compete, and the best guy will start. How about that?
Well, let me throw you this, though. I mean, and Glenn, you played in the game for a long time. Is there not in that locker room, whether it be 45, 55 guys in a locker room, is there not a tendency for, say, some of the guys to, we'll use in the example that we're using right now, is there some of the guys that's going to drift towards Trevor Harris and some of the guys that are going to drift towards Vernon Adams Jr.? And as we talk about a fractured locker room in which, if a guy's getting herked and jerked, and that sometimes that can cause problems within the team.
Yeah, to me, the only issue there, and it's really pretty obvious when you're sitting in the room, is that the players know who is winning the competition. So if the coach decides to go with the guy who isn't winning the competition because he likes him more, because he's paying him more, because of all those other ideas that don't matter, all those other reasons that do not matter to winning and losing, if he gets the start because of all that other stuff, the locker room then becomes divided because they go, what are they doing? This is not a football decision. But if they're both competing and, they both have different types of resumes but have shown that they can get it done, and Kahari Jones is playing the guy who's winning the competition that week, no one will be.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, in terms of your original point, Glenn, about babying quarterbacks, I wonder, too, we just talked about kickers a little bit. The other thing I do wonder is that, those are the guys, when a team loses or has success, what's the first position we go to? Quarterback. When a team loses,
right,
we criticize the quarterback. If your defensive back misses his guy and he gets blown out by 30 yards, we're not talking about that. So I do wonder, in terms of, we're going to replace them so quickly because we think that they have the most, impact on the game in that situation. So I do think we maybe baby them a little bit, but I also think that we look at kickers and quarterbacks, missed field goal, it's the kicker's fault. Missed pass in the fourth quarter, that's the quarterback's fault, even though he was wide open and that defensive back blew his coverage. So I think that those certain situations, and maybe that's why we're so quick to replace them, because we just think that does. And again, it goes back even to it kind of goes full circle, all we're talking about, the Hall of Fame conversation. Your offensive tackle misses his block. Maybe we're talking about a little bit, but we're not talking about as much as a quarterback who threw 3 interceptions because there was pressure in his face all game long. So it's a tricky one for sure.
Well, when Dave Ridgway missed, he said it was his fault. So
I know that.
I was his holder.
Let's continue the quarterback conversation because there really was great quarterback play this week. Cody Fajardo, Bo Levi, Mitchell, Caleros. These were guys that really came through in the clutch in the fourth quarter and led their teams to victory. If right now, I mean, again, we'll throw an imaginary game. It's, first down and 10 from the 40-yard line. You're down by, 6, and you got to get into the end zone, guys. Who are you giving the ball to right now? Is it Bo Levi? Is it Zach? Is it Cody? As I said, those are guys. Dane Evans. Who do you like there, Will?
I mean, it's crazy because there's all the questions coming in, but we talk about resumes and who right now gets the job done and who's got the most victories behind center or under center in the CFL. Like, it's kind of hard to go against Bo Levi Mitchell in that situation. It really is. Now, there has been some question marks, I think, about interceptions the last couple of years, but I do wonder, a lot of that, I think, has been injury related, and Bo is a guy who, if he's 75 or 60%, he's going to play. He wants to play. Maybe my shoulder's hurting a little bit and I can't throw it as well as I did the last 4 years, but I'm still going to go play because I think I can give my team the best chance to play or to win. And, I want to be that guy in the clutch. But, in terms of resume and what they've accomplished, and you stack up every quarterback's right now, he's head and shoulders above everybody. I know Zach Caleros has won the last 2 Grey Cups, and he might be kind of second in line there when you talk about game on the line, down by 6 in the red zone trying to score. But I don't know how you feel, Glenn. I still feel like right now, until we have a couple of seasons back-to-back where he's not that guy, it's kind of hard to go away from Bo Levi Mitchell.
Yeah, first of all, I'd take any one of the 3 of them. Give me Cody Fajardo and his running ability that he adds to the table. I'd give me Bo with his career resume, and give me Zach more recently and his accomplishments. I'll take any one of the 3. But I'm going to lean towards Zach right now because your question is based on today. If today we're 1st and 10 on our own 20 with a minute and a half to go, I think Zach in the last 2 years, championship years and back-to-back season, which is so hard to accomplish in pro sports now, as you guys know, he has got it done. And he's got it done with different personnel at times. And now he's 2-0 with a completely different sort of look to their team offensively, with no Andrew Harris and no Kenny Lawler and, different targets. And yet, and winning differently too, not as dominant as they were last year. So, but still getting it done. So I'm going to take Zach based on the 3 and based on right now. Overall career, you got to go with Bo. I agree with you there.
You talked about it. Some tough wins there for Winnipeg on the back-to-back situation between the Red Blacks and the Blue Bombers. Let's talk about Ottawa. 2 losses to the champions by a combined 9 points, Will. Ottawa were a bad football team last year. Do you see signs of hope there?
It's funny the way you phrased the question, because that's kind of the first place I was going to go, because Ottawa was so bad last year that you're kind of thinking, there's nowhere to go but up. And obviously signing a guy like Jeremiah Masoli, we talk about the impact quarterbacks have, especially in the 3-down game. I think that was a huge, huge win for Paul LaPolice and his staff to get him into the fold. And the unfortunate thing for them is I still don't think they have great talent around Masoli. And it's very evident in those first 2 games. I mean, the guy threw for over 700 yards, but he has 1 touchdown. And I think that, that is right now where Ottawa, I think, struggles a little bit, is they don't necessarily have those game-breaking, playmaking type receivers. Certainly don't have that in the running game, and at least not to this point. And, the offensive line, I think Masoli was hit a lot in that first half in the game on Friday in week 2. But credit where it's due. I mean, they're the 2-time defending Cup champions, and we talk about not only how hard it is to win back-to-back championships, but how hard it is to win in back-to-back weeks against the same opponent. And I think that, Ottawa deserves a lot of credit for being, punch for punch with Winnipeg in those 2 games. And if I'm a Red Blacks fan, I don't know how you can't help but feel confident, despite the fact that you're 0-2 and despite the fact that your quarterback has 1 touchdown pass in 2 games. I've liked a lot of what I'm seeing from Ottawa, and if you compare it to last season, I don't know how you can't say, Glenn, that they're not taking the steps in the right direction.
Oh yeah. This Ottawa football team is head over heels better than last year. Way better than last year. First of all, you mentioned Jeremiah Masoli. It starts there for sure. Over 700 yards passing in 2 games against a defense that was dominant, has been dominant for 3 or 4 years now, has the best 2 defensive ends. Jeffcoat didn't play in game 1, but he did in game 2. Adam Bighill in the middle of that defense. So they are to push Winnipeg. I know there's no moral victories, and coaches won't talk about it because it just takes you down the wrong. It gives you an excuse. It gives you an out as a player, and you don't want to do that. But they are so much better. They have a veteran O-line now. They're way better up front. Jalen Acklin is ready to explode onto a 1,300 yard season if he stays healthy. Jeremiah gives them hope. Jeremiah can be a championship quarterback. I know that. I've seen it in him. So they're way better there. They can rotate running backs and still be great. I think the only thing they're missing personnel-wise is a dominant pass rusher. Who's going to be their dominant pass rusher, their 14-sack guy? I'm not sure they have that guy in the lineup right now, but they're playing pretty good team defense, and I like their secondary. So they're head over heels, maybe the most improved team
Glenn,
I've seen
hearing a
this
word
season
and a
after 2
phrase
weeks.
being used, and you hear it in football all the time, and I know I've used it myself, but then when I really analyze what I'm saying, I wonder what it means. I keep hearing the word, you got to learn how to win. How do you learn how to win?
Well, you do what you've seen in Winnipeg. You allow as a coach to empower the players to build the culture in the room where they build trust. So that takes humility. So you're sitting in a video session. These are small little details that build towards what you're talking about to learn how to win in key moments. And you're in the video room, and instead of making an excuse for the mistake that's coming up, and it's coming up and your teammates are going to see it, you have a choice to make at that moment as a player. And at that moment, if you say, well, they had this and there was this guy and he didn't tell me the call, you just made an excuse. Your players now lose a little bit of respect. When it comes around to their turn, do they make that same choice? And now you don't have the culture in the room you need. If you're humble, you take accountability, you look in the mirror, and you continue to work hard and improve, then you build the respect in that room, you build the trust, and now you created the culture, and the culture is, I'll do it for you. And if he's doing, I'll do it for you, and I got your back, you got mine. Now you win those games, and you start to learn how to make those plays and know when the sense of urgency is necessary, know when it's time in the game. If we don't get this first down, that could be in the third quarter too, guys. If we don't get this first down, this could change the game. We need this one right here. I think they've got the veterans to realize that and know it.
I think
now
I don't think we
just
talk
keep
about
growing
culture in pro sports enough. I really don't. And I think that is massively key to building a championship program. And I'll just take Calgary, for example. I mean, even last year, they probably didn't have the most talented group. And, yeah, they didn't start well, but they finished off the year well because that's what they've built here in Calgary. And guys that come in, personnel changes, they just kind of start to fall in line and understand what it takes to win. And that goes from Dave Dickinson, John Hofnagel down. And I think they've had enough continuity within their personnel from a roster standpoint to keep that going. But that's how you do it. And they've done it in Winnipeg now for the last half decade. They're starting to build that in Saskatchewan. We've seen that here a little bit. And no surprise that, the guy that their head coach to their last name Dickinson. But I think that is exactly what it takes. And I don't know if we talk enough about culture and how that really can, provide results on the field. And I love Glen's point, because when you start moving away from being individuals and you're a team, that's when you have success. And what's the old saying, team over talent wins games all the time? It's 100% true. You can have 4 or 5 really talented guys, but if you don't have the other 7 on the field playing the same way, you're probably going to lose. Yeah,
and Bubba, I'll give you an example, a real quick story after the game 1 where Michael O'Shea said he didn't like the play of his offensive line. He didn't say it that way. He said our offensive line could be more aggressive, and we didn't run the ball well enough. And I asked him, well, what do you tell them? How do you do that? I mean, how do you portray that to a championship team and say, hey, that wasn't good enough? Like, are you just going to go in there and be honest, or how do you do it? And he says, I don't have to do it. They'll do it. They watch the video and they know the game enough. They're veterans. The culture is there in the room. They'll take care of this, and they'll make the corrections. So, yeah, they're going to always work on techniques and fundamentals. But as far as the culture goes, he's not worried that the guys within that room will make the corrections
one last
necessary.
one here, guys. You talk about
games.
Winnipeg winning both games. The Tiger Cats have lost both games, and now they're going to play the defending champions. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I know it's a Canadian game where you play 18 games, but 0-3 doesn't look too good. Glenn, are the Ticats in trouble from what you've seen?
No. It's I still think they're a very good football team. They're well coached. Coach O has that understanding of the culture. That's why they've made 2 appearances back-to-back years in the Cup. He understands it and gets it. He's building the same thing, very similar to what O'Shea has done in Winnipeg. I have faith in Dane Evans. I think they're fine. 0-2, yeah, that's not ideal. But if you're a player in that locker room right now, you want to play the best team in the league. You want to say, we're going to break this. We're going to break this against the best team. Bring it on, and let's do it tomorrow. Because the feeling they have right now is that they're physically ill. They're sick to their stomachs. They're working their butt off. They're trying to find the answers. And bring on the best you got, because if we break out of our slump, let's break out of it that way.
They're going to be ticked off the way that they lost that game against Calgary. And we just talked about culture. Look at all the guys on that Hamilton team who've had success. And obviously on defense, you've got Simone Lawrence, you've got Tunde Adeleke, you've got Ciante Evans, you've got Micah Johnson. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. And then, of course, you've got Coach O, who it's no accident they were in back-to-back Grey Cups. And, yeah, they lost both games, but that's a group that knows everything that it's about. And, yeah, 0-3 might not be ideal, even if they get to that point. If they do get to 0-3, I'm still not worried about it because they got 15 games to right the ship, and I still think that they're a group that can absolutely do that. And it's not like they've gotten their doors blown off in those 2 games either. I mean, yeah, the second half they pretty much did get their doors blown off, but let's not forget, they took it to the Calgary Stampeders in the first half of that game. So I think there's enough there, and I know that's a cliche, but there's enough positives to build on, and I do think that that's a very veteran group that I don't think I'm worried if I'm Coach O and the Ticats.
Well, guys, you used the word culture. I like the kind of culture that we've developed here on the CFL this week, and it starts with the people that do all the talking. I just guide the ship. Will Nault from 960 Calgary, Sportsnet Calgary, thanks for joining us. Glenn, look forward to hearing your breaking down of the game. It's the best in the game, and I know you probably don't want to hear that, but we look forward to hearing it every single week. So thanks, guys, for joining us. Guys, this has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. You can catch us every week, starting on Monday on your favorite podcast catcher. And as I say, we're talking with the best hosts, and we're talking about the most opinionated and controversial, and I guess most importantly, the most knowledgeable people out there. So thanks for joining us this week. We look forward to week 3. Enjoy the games, folks, on the Ticats Audio Network.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.